Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels. Iron Man match. Goes 60 minutes. No falls take place. Then Gorilla Monsoon deems that there must be a winner. Drags Bret back to the ring. We have an extra minute, effectively, of action in which Shawn Michaels hits 2 Sweet Chin Musics and pins Bret Hart. Just before we go on, the plural of Sweet Chin Music, is that Sweet Chin's music or Sweet Chin Musics? I think it's Sweet Chin's music, but I'm not entirely certain.
Sweet's Chin Music.
Sweet's Chin Music? Oh, I don't know about that.
I don't know about that.
That sounds like a bar.
I think it's got to be Sweet Chin's music, but I don't know for definite. It's a difficult one because it's a name, so I guess it is Sweet Chin Musics, but it just doesn't sound right at all. It just sounds all wrong. So I don't know what to do here. I don't know whether to throw to Stephen first because he's been so outspoken about it in recent weeks that I feel like I need to. But at the same time, I kind of want to get a new perspective. So I'm going to go with Matt. I want to hear what Matt thinks of this match.
Well, where do I start with this one? Right. Okay. Right. Here's where I'll start. I know. I admire what they were trying to do. Looking at it on paper, the idea of Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart for an hour sounds really good. It didn't quite work out that way in practice. Now, I'm not going to say that I thought that it was a bad match, because to be honest, I actually didn't think it was that bad. And, you know, it wasn't bad at all. It was actually not bad. I didn't say it was good, okay? I've been conditioned, and in all fairness to Bret, like I said, as we all know, I'm not the biggest Bret Hart fan in the world, but I have been conditioned to certainly appreciate his work, and you know what? It is pretty damn good. So I was actually expecting better, and I didn't quite get that. Now, obviously, hindsight, it's so easy to certainly look back and say, oh, you know, they should have done this, they should have done that. But there are so many different ways that this could have gone that would have been better. Now, it probably was hard to tell what the crowd was going to think of it. But let's be brutally honest, the crowd didn't give a shit until towards the end, which is a gigantic shame, to be honest. They really didn't care. Like, because they had an hour, obviously both guys really tried to work the most sort of scientific style that you can imagine and really tried to pace themselves. Like, you know, you're talking probably like 20-25 minutes of trading headlocks and things like that, which certainly for your casual fan is just boring as hell. Now, I can certainly appreciate that, having seen a ridiculous amount of hours of wrestling. You guys potentially can as well. But again, the casual viewer is probably just going to be bored to death, and that's a lot of the people who attend WrestleMania. So it just took far too long to get going. And again, this is using hindsight, but if they were going to go with the idea of wanting to have an Iron Man match, you know, somebody should have just said no. And because the stipulation being an Iron Man killed the match dead, because people were expecting multiple falls, you know, at least one before the end of the 60 minutes. If they wanted them to go 60 minutes, just say to the pair of them, cool, you've got 60 minutes, get out there and do your thing. And I think the reaction would have been completely different. But the fact that people were conditioned to expect pinfall submissions, that type of thing, just killed it dead. Because until you got down to, I'd probably say maybe the last 10 minutes, that's when people really started to care. It just wasn't working out. Like I said, they tried. They really did try. I think the whole purpose of it being an Iron Man was, and to go the 60 minutes, was to try and make Shawn look every bit the equal to Bret, which, I gotta be honest, I kind of think they failed at doing. You know, you guys will be able to say better than me, but I'd love to know what the build-up was like for Shawn prior to getting to that match, because watching it at the time, I was thinking it felt like he was a total underdog, and it didn't seem right seeing the two of them face off. It seemed quite awkward. It was definitely polarizing to a lot of people, is probably the phrase, but I didn't mind it. It didn't work. They tried. Yeah, it was all right.
We'll come to Stephen, your thoughts on the match in a minute. But in terms of the Iron Man stipulation, you said they shouldn't have done it because ultimately it meant it built up certain expectations. Bear in mind, though, that they booked it not necessarily to make it the best match ever, but to sell lots of pay-per-views. Now, in fairness, that didn't really work in the end because this wasn't particularly high-level pay-per-view buy rate. But that's surely the bigger indication of whether it's a mistake to put this stipulation on rather than the quality. The quality ultimately didn't really matter. I mean, ultimately, if everyone came out of it saying, that was a bit disappointing, so what? You're likely never going to use the match again anyway. I mean, they've used it maybe a handful of times since, but, you know, ultimately, you're likely never going to use it again anyway. So no one's going to be like, I can't watch that again because that'll be really boring because you're not going to use it again anyway. So surely the point is, let's offer the match, let's market it as something really epic because it's between these two, and then we never return to it. And I think my problem from that perspective, that choice, is nothing to do with the quality, and it's all to do with the fact that they are selling it on the prospect of it being a great match, and I hate that. I just think it's bad selling of a match. You don't sell it on that basis. You sell it on the basis of who's going to win, who's going to lose.
Yeah, I get what you're saying in terms of selling it on, in terms of the quality of the match. But yeah, like I said, for me, it just the crowd it was just so obvious they just didn't care, and I just really feel that they just shot themselves in the foot by not having like any falls. I mean, again, I think even if they did something along the lines of, because I particularly feel they were quite conditioned within the last sort of 10 minutes, they were really thinking, oh, okay, maybe we might finally get a fall, and I think that would have made the excitement of the match a lot better to the people in attendance, and certainly at home as well, because there were a couple of near falls towards the end, which really did sort of get people going, and maybe that would have been something, and it would have made it more entertaining. Who knows? But yeah, like I said, it didn't work.
Well, Stephen, before we I throw to you, I'll give you Pat Patterson's viewpoint. This is from 35 Years of WrestleMania, the old coffee table book. Pat Patterson, who was the originator of the Iron Man match. Pat Patterson looks back. It was a dream match of mine that I always wanted to see go an hour. The only two guys in that era that could do a 60-minute Iron Man were Bret and Shawn. I'll tell you something else. Vince didn't want to do it. He was concerned that people would get bored because of the match's length, which happens if you don't have the two right guys. We had the two right guys. Stephen.
So this was the first time ever on a podcast where I thought, I literally thought for a moment, do I actually watch this again? Because I didn't think that anything that I was about to see would change my mind on what I thought from watching this match 2 or 3 times over history. I tried to watch this back probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I legitimately fell asleep. So, and that's not a joke. That is, I was sitting in my old flat in Wimbledon and I fell asleep watching this match. So yeah, that said, I did watch it again. For what it's worth, going before the match, they had a background video which I thought was really poor. Shawn Michaels' excruciating babyface mode promo, and Bret's wasn't much better. So I'm sure you'll cut to this in terms of we'll talk about this later in terms of the whole production, the video package. I thought this was, for WWF was so good at this stuff was really poor. They tried to make it feel massive with referees' instructions I can't ever remember seeing in a WWF match before, which is a nice touch. But this didn't get a ripple from the Anaheim crowd at all. They just weren't into this. The best thing of the whole match was when I think it was Tony Chimmel was acting as timekeeper, and he was super kicked to death by Shawn Michaels, and Vince shouted, "Oh no!" But the first 30 minutes of this match kill it. So the first 30 minutes was so bad that whatever they did in the next 30 minutes, you can't make up for that 30 minutes, because like a play or a film, if the first 30 minutes, or first 50% of it are so dreadful, you're not coming back and saying, well, that's the film of the year, even if they were. And they never got that. They never got to that space where this is like match of the year for 1996 or whatever, but they just didn't get there. And the latter WWF Iron Man matches were so much more exciting with multiple falls. And I just thought, like you said, Matt, this was the completely wrong way to go with this. And the finish was really perplexing. You're trying to get Michaels, you're trying to get people behind Michaels as new champion. Bret is going away. So why have Bret fans think that he was robbed by your new top babyface? Because Bret was robbed in this. If this had no time limit, Michaels is submitting in that sharpshooter, or he's passing out. He's not getting to the ropes. And that is, I just don't understand why you're doing that. I know you want to build for a return, but they had no intention of turning Bret heel here. And I don't know what Vince was thinking with this. They should have done this. If they're doing it this way, this should have been like a 2 out of 3 falls match. Maybe have Bret get Michaels in the sharpshooter early. Michaels submits because he's whatever, because that's a thing in 2 out of 3 falls when the babyface can tap out because they want to survive. Get Michaels to have a pin and then let him roll him up with 5 seconds to go, shake hands, etc. I thought Shawn's post-match facials were barely believable after telling Bret, get out of my ring. So obviously what a nice guy this guy was. I just thought I didn't buy this at all, and I never really, this is the bit actually where it was worth watching again, because I'd never really noticed this before. But Michaels was like, he's just like such a, it's like, how do you get behind this guy? There's nothing likable about this bloke in 1997 whatsoever. And Vince McMahon, bloody hell, embarrassing himself out of into different stratosphere by shouting, celebrate if you can, at Shawn Michaels. Is like, you're an embarrassment, Vince. Absolute embarrassment. And to be honest, this whole post-match made me feel sick, actually nauseous at this disgusting booking, disgusting choice of new champion, disgusting treatment of Bret Hart that we'd had year after year after year.
Wow. There you go. He's laid it down. He's dropped the knife. He's walked out. We're taking a dump. It's all happening. So where do I start with this? There's loads to unpack in my view. So let's start with the end, because I do agree. I think this is a really silly end to a match, and I don't really know why. Because as you said, they might want to build to the return of Bret Hart, but as far as I understand it, Vince didn't even know Bret was coming back.
Yeah, he didn't. Yeah.
So Bret was going away for 6 months. He was going to take some time with his family, do some other stuff in, TV world and whatnot. And at that point, his contract was going to be up, and there was going to be some kind of, negotiation. At that time, they thought he may even negotiate with WWE, which he actually did do at that time, and got a pretty solid offer from them. And Vince had to counter it. So there was no guarantees he's coming back. So why are you trying to protect him so much? And in fact, it makes you wonder, if they'd have just put Shawn Michaels over clean, and then Bret had decided to go to WWE in 1997, how different life would have been. How different life might be if that had all taken place. But yeah, so I don't know. I agree. I have no idea why they protected Bret Hart here. They've already protected him. He's just been in the ring for an hour. You don't need to protect him anymore. Have Shawn Michaels get the victory within the 60 minutes if that's what you want to do. I completely agree. I think the end is silly. I think in terms of the Iron Match stipulation and whether it does anything for the match, no, it really doesn't. It doesn't help at all. And I think the reason is, if you imagine, think about football, right? Football works in the same way as an Iron Man match works, right? Effectively, you got a certain amount of time, and you got to score as many points, if you like, in time to beat your opponent. Most football matches end, or the decision is really made before the 60-minute mark. And certainly the vast majority, is going to win by the 85th minute of the match. Some matches that changes, but very rarely. It's not a regular occurrence. In wrestling, it's conditioned that your end has to be the raging climax, has to be that big conclusion. So you're always going to get to the end of one of these matches either 1-0, 1-1, or I say 1-0, a gap of 1, I should say, or them be equal. So that as a fan, if they don't get any falls, then it's going to come down to the final few minutes. And if you still then don't deliver, that's going to massively impact your ability to sort of say this was a good match. Saying all that, this is my favorite viewing of watching this match so far, watching it this time. I think as I've got older, I've appreciated slower paced stuff more and more. So there was a match at King of the Ring 96. We reviewed King of the Ring 96, I think, last year. Shawn Michaels and David Boy Smith, obviously as part of this Shawn Michaels' run as the champion, where they go through, it's about 25 minutes. Both Tom and Old Man really disliked it. I thought it was really, really good. They basically went through kind of similar what they do in the first half an hour of this match, where they have a little exchange, a little flurry, then a rest hold of some kind, then another flurry, then another rest hold. But the difference in that match was that the gaps between the flurries gradually decreased, and the flurry of activity got more elaborate and more exciting as it went. It just built superbly, I thought, to a really good end. Bret and Shawn are trying to do the same thing here, but they're trying to do it over the course of an hour, and it's too long, because that means for the first half an hour or so, you have to be going really slow. Otherwise, by the end, you're going at 100 miles an hour. What's also disappointing is that I think at about the 25-minute in mark, so with 35 minutes left to go, they do then have a period of about 15 to 20 minutes of actually really good action, where they have big moves aplenty, they have loads of near falls, where the fans actually do start to get into it for a bit. And they get to about 17 minutes where this really, really action-packed bit happens, where that's where the super kick happens to, I'm not sure if it's Tony Jumbo, but whoever it is. But there's also loads of other like really big moves, really impactful moments. And then at 17 minutes, they slow down again. And there's then a 12-minute lull in the match where nothing really happens. And for me, it's that 12 minutes that completely kills this match, because what they should have done in that 12 minutes is had the fall. That's the way I feel like it. If they wanted to slow it down, have the falls, slow it down that way. You could have 2 or 3 falls, make it 2-1 or something, and then you're okay to slow it down. And it's only when they hit the 5-minute mark they then take it up a gear again. But by that point, you've been knocked out of it. If you'd managed to get through that first 25 minutes and you still kind of invested, which I was, if you get to the 17-minute mark, you then get kicked out, as long as you're not already kicked out of it before that point. So for me, that was where it really took a nosedive. Saying that, I still thought what they did was really good. And that sort of 17-minute period, 18-minute period between the 35-minute mark and the 17-minute mark, I thought showcased exactly what this match could have been and probably should have been. It just was after a 25-minute stretch of really slow, quite dull stuff that I was able to sit through. And I think, again, there's a sort of sense of you have to be in a mindset to watch a match like this. You can't just sit down having been dictated that you need to watch it at a given time. You really have to get yourself in the zone to say, right, I'm going to sit down and watch this. I did it with Greg Valentine versus Bob Backlund 60-minute Broadway that they had at Madison Square Garden somewhere from 1981. And again, really quite enjoyed it. it, but I think it was probably really boring, but I still quite enjoyed it. So for me, the big problem is that gap after about 17 minutes through to about 5 minutes to go, it's just not really great at all.
Can I throw out a potentially controversial opinion just on that?
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Because I've seen 60-minute, or I've seen a 78-minute match actually, where I don't think either guy was doing too many rest holds in what I consider to be the best match ever. Was their cardio not up to it? Was Bret and Shawn's cardio not up to it? They had a hard schedule back then, but something in it, one of them or both of them, and I won't cast aspersions to where I think it might have been, just kind of party guy at the time. But if they're going to do a 60-minute match, I was listening to the WrestleMania 11 one earlier on, talking about draws, and Danielson and Page did a really good 60-minute match that went to a draw, a really, really strong 60-minute match, and that was great. And I watched that live, and I can't say I can remember that minute by minute, but there wasn't a lot of resting in that. They were at it, and their cardio was better. And I know that this is a different, we're talking about some time on, and maybe athletes a little bit better. And we talked about training methods and recovery and all that sort of stuff. But were these guys just not up to doing this at the time? I've also seen Sting and Ric Flair go 45 minutes, and that was better than this. And the Steamboat stuff was pretty long as well. So were they just not there?
I think my inkling is to believe that they just underestimated what they could do. I think they tried too hard to save themselves in the first 25 minutes of the match and didn't need to go that far. They could have done more, and I think at the end you can see it. Like, you can see that they're not puffing. They should be absolutely blown up by the end, because just like for example, a time trialist in a cycling race, you basically measure effort, so you put in everything for as absolutely long as you can, and at the end you should have absolutely zero left to give. They weren't at that point. They could have gone another 20-25 minutes, no problem at all, I feel like. So I think that's more like it. It's that it wasn't that they weren't conditioned to do it, they just underestimated what they could do, and I think that colored the first 25 minutes. And you say it's very hard to recover from that. If you've gone 25 minutes and the match is dull, it's really hard to recover. I slightly disagree with the idea that the fans didn't care. Like, I felt like they cared. Don't get me wrong, they were quiet, but understandably so. There's not a lot going on, but I don't think that necessarily translate to they don't care. I think it just translates to this isn't something that's going to get people out of the seats, but they're just quietly watching. They're just observing this match as it plays out. And it's I remember hearing Bret Hart talk about his match with Benoit in the memorial match for Owen Hart, when he was saying that on Nitro, basically they came out, they started their match, no frills, people were sat down, they were quiet, they weren't really they weren't massively into it, but gradually the fans got into it as they watched the art form unfold. So it's a very Bret Hart thing, I think. I don't think he'd have minded that. And as I say, as the match went on, I felt like the near falls did get the necessary kind of excitement and investment from the fans. It's just that, I guess, also watching it retrospectively, the result, what's going to happen. It's even harder to reinvest in the journey that these two people are on. So there's a lot in there. As I say, I used to slate this match a lot, and just as much as you did, Stephen, before in the weeks leading up to this. I don't feel as negatively about it as I used to. I think this is actually a really good match. It's just not great, and I think you're expecting absolute classic from these two. That's the biggest problem, and again, that's my problem with the way they sold it, is they're selling it as if this is going to be an instant classic. And I don't think you should ever sell a match on how good it's going to be. I think you sell it on the concept of who do you want to win, and let's see this play out. One of these two guys is going to show that they are the best by the end of this night. That's what you should always sell your matches on, and there's too much about the quality of it that's being sold here. And so when they don't deliver a classic, it's instantly as rubbish. And I think I was in that category for many, many years, but I think having watched it the last time and this time, I feel like this is a very good match. It's just not a classic like Bret and Shawn should have been capable of, and would have done probably if they'd just been given a regular 25-minute main event contest. And this is probably the time they were best placed to do it. So there are the two matches. There are the two big matches, if you like. One was at Survivor Series 92, when Shawn wasn't really quite there at that point, and certainly wasn't main event level, and Bret was still struggling to really kind of establish himself as the main event attraction. And the other time was Survivor Series, when obviously we know what happened there. So this was their chance, and they kind of didn't happen, which is a real shame. I'll give you Bret's perspective on some of the match now. There is some stuff about him talking about the build-up. You mentioned this, Stephen.
Running on ice roads or something while Michaels super kicks people and flips off things and upside down press ups and stuff.
So he says, I was training on my own really hard when the WWE camera crew came up to film my vignettes. I just got home from India and was pretty banged up. I see Shawn doing the Rocky thing and he's looking really fit, and of course he had 3 months to do this. The first thing they did was film me on the icy bike paths of Calgary so they could get the city skyline. I could run back then, but it was all ice like a hockey rink. Then they went to my house to film me with swimming laps in my pool, and I thought it was a good idea until I remembered that I could barely swim. So then the final segment, they take me out to my dad's house and they want my dad to train me like they had Jose with Shawn. I can only imagine how this is going to look to the fans. They show Shawn so fit and so primed, and I don't look like I'm going to be anybody, but it was still a fun experience. So that's the build-up. Then this is how he views the match. Again, this is through the lens of WWE, and I give you an example of the lens of WWE. There is a picture of Shawn on the zip wire coming into the arena. There's insert to that a picture of Vince McMahon on the zip wire and a caption underneath: Vince McMahon never asks a superstar to do anything he wouldn't do.
Oh, piss off.
So I thought I'd just give you the view of that. So Bret reflects, you can take all the wrestlers from previous generations, the Jack Briscoes, the Harley Races, and the Dory Funks, and I don't know of any two wrestlers that ever cut a pace the way Shawn and I did that day. It was a real testimony to both of us as athletes to pour it on the way we did. And I will say one thing about Shawn. He was amazing. He took a lot of punishment in that match. It was always stand out as the hardest match I've ever had. I remember looking at the clock, seeing 4:59 and thinking, I can't believe it. We did it. The match was so perfect.
Sorry, Bret. I love you. I love you. And I always will love you. But you're wrong. You're
Wow,
wrong. This is not even top 10 of your career. Nowhere near.
Whitney Houston's just turned up. Wants her music back. The way he acts after the match is so unbabyface like it's untrue. Forget what he says about Bret, because you can't see it. You can see him talking to Earl. You can see him, he's a bit pissed off about something, but you can't really see what he's saying. But it's the bit when Earl is affixing the title to his waist after the match, and he's having a bit of trouble. But first of all, you're a babyface. Why are you getting the referee to do it? Don't be a weirdo. Just do it yourself. And secondly, then he pushes him away. And he gets fed up. He gets fed up and annoyed of Earl taking so long about it. So he pushes him away. And like, you're supposed to be the lead babyface in the company. You're supposed to get people to like you. How's that ever going to be possible if you do stuff like this?
The thing, do you know what? I'm sorry, Matt. I'm just going to jump in. I'm actually going to defend Shawn Michaels here for a second, because what was Shawn here? 30, 31? I put a lot of this on Vince. This guy in 1996, and he proved in 1997, was not capable of being the WWF World Champion. Whether it was substance issues, probably mental health issues as well. This guy was not capable of this role. And Vince McMahon picked him for this role, and it never worked. It never worked with Shawn particularly. Shawn's comeback was incredible. It was such a good... I really enjoyed Shawn Michaels post 2002 and all that time, and he was a different sort of character, and it was great. Brilliant. You know, really like him. Not fit to lace Bret Hart's boots in any way, shape or form, but really good performer, 100%. But this is... in a way, I don't really even blame Shawn Michaels for this. It's so bloody obvious what's going to happen here that Shawn, you just couldn't do business with Shawn. Oh, I've lost my smile, and I'm not going to do this job, and I'm not going to do that, and I'm doing this and doing that. It's like, Vince, that's you. That's on you. It's so obvious. It was never going to work with Shawn Michaels. So that's what you get. If that's not red flags all over the place, why are you continuing to pick this guy over Bret Hart?
To be honest, with a lot of the sort of Bret and Shawn stuff at the time, I haven't seen a lot of it for the time, so it's a lot harder for me to sort of, to speak on it. But in terms of him being the guy, I mean, like, at least it's weird for me to say this because I've never really been that much of a big Bret Hart fan. But like I said earlier, for me, when I watched this, it felt, Bret versus Shawn felt strange. There was something about it that didn't quite feel right, and like Shawn felt like a big underdog, and yeah, I mean, like, I was a massive fan of Shawn Michaels 2002 onwards, but it didn't feel right. So to be fair, yeah, the way that the whole finish went down, I'll be honest, I can't say I don't really get the whole thing with I see nothing wrong with the ref putting the belt around his waist. I mean, do it, whatever. But
I get it if he's a heel. I just think basically Shawn Michaels is seen as a cocky guy. That was his character for the first 3 or 4 years of a single wrestler. You just need a bit of humility somewhere, and that's a place for the humility to seep in, or at least not to back it up. Like, yeah, I mean, the shoving the ref on that, yeah, you could tell he was pissed off and everything. But I tell you what, one thing very quickly that I did, a different sort of angle, if you don't mind, that I did want to sort of put on this, and this kind of reflects the show, this show as a whole as well. Like, I know we mentioned it a while back, Ben, I can't remember the exact WrestleMania it was, where you said you felt like it was a real turning point. For me, this show as a whole is probably the biggest turning point I think that I've seen throughout doing these shows. This
really felt like a change. And there was a point in this match where, it might be a little thing to some people, where Bret hit a pile driver. Very nicely done as well, I must say. And, Shawn kicked out of it. And, only a little thing. But when I saw it, I thought, oh, wow, hang on here. Based on a lot of the stuff that we've seen, in a lot of the past WrestleManias up until this point, that would have been a killer. That would have potentially put somebody out of action. And they kicked out of it. And that, I was like, oh, right, okay. That did feel like a bit of a change. I was like, okay, we're going in that sort of direction now, where like people are sort of used to today, I suppose, with more kickouts and false finishes and that type of thing. So I do feel that was an interesting point in the match. I'm not sure what you guys thought.
I think that might be more just down to we've got an hour to fill and we need to create some drama. I'm not sure. And don't get me wrong, Bret did it on Owen at WrestleMania 10 and Owen kicks out. So it's not like a new thing necessarily. To be honest, I just think if there were other people doing pile drivers, and I think obviously Undertaker was doing it, but there weren't too many others doing pile drivers of the time. If they were, though, they weren't doing them the way Bret was doing them. The way Bret did them made it look like it would genuinely kill you. So, but I do get your point. I think that there's a change in wrestling style that starts to come across here, probably more than anything else. I think the roster still largely is the one that kind of was set up in those first three matches of WrestleMania 8. Still Bret, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, they're still the main baby faces of the promotion. But maybe the style, the way people are working, I can see that definitely. So there was one other thing I wanted to touch upon about the main event. The commentary was interesting here. So you touched upon it, Stephen, with Vince. And I think all the way through, actually, he's quite annoying here. And I'm usually the biggest defender of Vince McMahon's commentary of all. But he is annoying here mainly because he is so determined to put Shawn over in his commentary. And I'm like, just put this effort into booking the match better, and you don't need to do that. Like, the reason you're having to do this is because you're about to book the match so poorly in terms of getting Shawn over as the main babyface, and also he himself is going to undercut it quite significantly with his actions. Whilst Lawler, I thought on commentary, was excellent during the main event. There's even one bit at the beginning where they're talking about the fans, and they're saying all the Click hate Bret Hart, and the Bret Hart fans hate Shawn Michaels, and Vince is like, oh no, they're fans of the WWF, and I'm like, no, that's not how you book wrestling either. No one's shouldn't be a fan of promotions. This is the whole problem with the whole AEW WWF nonsense every single day on Twitter, is that we're fans of promotion. That's just stupid.
Completely agree, Ben. Hallelujah.
That's so stupid. And here you want fans to invest in Bret or Shawn. If you're really lucky, you can get them to invest in both, but not when they're fighting each other and not when they clearly dislike each other. So you can't have it every way. You build up your stars so that the fans invest in them and specifically want to watch them. That's the golden rule of pro wrestling. There's nothing else. You can attract a baseline of wrestling fans by having them invest in your company as a whole, but it doesn't go as deep as in getting them to invest in individuals. That's where you really make your money. That's where you really make stars. UFC does exactly the same thing. There's people who follow UFC, but you make your money out of people being followed as individuals. That's when you get your spikes. When Brock Lesnar gets 1 million buys, it's because it's Brock Lesnar. It's not because it's UFC. And that's the same for boxing. That's the same for everything. So that bit really was pissing me off. And he was trying to hit that note a lot, whilst Lawler was like, well, that's not true. It's about, the Bret fans and the Shawn fans aren't going to like each other, and they don't like the other wrestler. And so I found his commentary quite enlightening all the way through, because he was also talking about how, he was kind of bringing that kind of sense of this being a sport. He was talking about how Shawn was out wrestling Bret in the early going, and that was a surprise, and that was what Bret was going to lean on, was his wrestling, and he was going to take Shawn off his feet, all that stuff. So I really appreciated Lawler in his commentary during this match. And on the flip side, Vince was just incredibly annoying, and I just thought, like, you could prevent yourself from having to be this annoying by just booking the match better and letting it speak for itself.